You are listening to Productivity Straight Talk with your host, Amber De La Garza. Amber is a sought-after productivity coach, trainer, speaker, and writer who gives entrepreneurs the straight talk on personal productivity. No BS, fluff, or overused jargon. Just actionable strategies to get results and succeed in business. And here is your host, Amber De La Garza, the Productivity Specialist.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to Productivity Straight Talk. Today is episode 200, the evolution of Productivity Straight Talk. You heard it, 200. Some of you have already been reaching out to me saying it's coming. I see episode 197, 198 dropping, and we made it. And I say we, stay tuned and find out why I say we made it to 200. 200 is such a big accomplishment when you think about showing up consistently, doing something consistently in your business every week for 4 years. And I want to celebrate with you, but not just celebrate. I want you to stay tuned because I am going to pull back the curtains on my journey through podcasting. But to really do that, I have to take it back to before I podcast and what that business looked like. And then I'm also going to share with you the evolution of my business because of the impact of podcasting. There are going to be a lot of ahas and takeaways and business tips and productivity strategies shared. So stay tuned, even if you never plan on being a podcaster. My goal today is to share with you why consistency matters, how to discern what the best strategy is for you in your business. And when it comes to marketing in your business, I'm going to share with you where I've really messed up, where I think I have made some wins, things that I've learned, and all the things I wish I knew before I started a business. If you're a business owner who wants to improve your time management and elevate your productivity so you can maximize profits, reduce stress, and make time for what matters most, then you're in the right place, and I'm so glad you've joined me. And now, let's get to the straight talk. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. My vision for today's episode is that it will feel like we are sitting across from each other at happy hour, just chatting about business. So I'm going to share with you thoughts and opinions and struggles and ahas and things I wish people had told me. I wish somebody had said, "Hey, Amber, you're thinking of starting a business? Pull up a seat. Here's what I would tell you." So pull up a seat. I'm going to share with you the evolution of Productivity Straight Talk. And as I mentioned in the intro, we got to start before Productivity Straight Talk so you know how I got here 4 years ago. When I first started my business, I had no idea what I was creating. Like what my normal day and business and life look like today is nothing that I could have even imagined. It wasn't even within my experience. It wasn't even possible because I had never seen it happen. I had never seen someone actually own a business and work virtual or work from home or really create their own schedule or have like their dream clients or make the money that I make in my business. Like I did not see that as a child. I didn't see it growing up. And so for me, this evolution over the last 9 years has been me seeing what's possible and thinking bigger and bigger and bigger. So as I share with you about where this started, just know that it is from a totally different experience than I experienced today. When I started my business, it was because I had quit my corporate job. I had been with a company for over a decade and I had had my son. I left on maternity leave and I took all my maternity and vacation. And about 3 weeks before I was supposed to go back, I had decided there's no way I can talk myself into going back to my corporate job. And my husband and I decided, we'll do it. We'll figure it out. Why don't you stay home? And I wanted to stay home. That was the big shift, is looking at my son and knowing what I was going back to on my corporate job. And I thought, I don't want this. So at this point, I only knew what I didn't want. I was not clear about what I truly wanted because while I did want to stay home, I didn't even know what that entailed, right? Like I'm a first-time mom. I had not even envisioned staying home the whole time I was pregnant. Like the plan was that I go back. So when my husband and I had discussed this, I decided to schedule a meeting with the COO. That's who I reported to in the company. And I was so nervous because this was my entire career at this company and I was leaving without really a plan. So I went in and I explained what was going on. And I remember this so vividly because I was so nervous. The COO leaned over the table and says, "Good for you for choosing family over business." And I remember taking this deep breath of like, yeah, okay, that is what I'm doing. But he didn't skip a beat. And he said, "Would you like to stay on as a consultant?" And I was like, well, what would that mean? Like, what do you have in mind? And I was like stumbling because that wasn't part of the plan either. And I was not expecting that. I thought I was walking away from everything. So I said, well, let's talk about it, but I really need to go home and talk to my husband because I was coming in here to quit and I'm not sure what that's going to look like. So after further conversations with the COO, with my husband, and just really figuring out what this could look like, I said yes. And this was the first experience I had into working for myself and the freedom of working for myself. But more importantly, seeing the value of my skill set in a different way than through the lens of an employee. And so once I was working for them consulting, I did it for about 18 months and I would remote in from home. I still had my office at the company, but I never went into the office. I remoted in and worked. And now, guess what? I wasn't in management. I wasn't in meetings all day. I wasn't dealing with like corporate politics. I got to do the favorite things I loved doing and that I was really good at. And those were the projects, the operations, the how do we solve for these problems? Like that was the best part of my job. And so everything else got stripped away to where I only got to do the things I loved with a tremendous amount of freedom. It was when my son was napping or at night after he went to bed. And I thought, this is what it's like. And then I realized I was making around the same amount of money as when I was working 40 plus hours a week on salary as a manager. So when I saw that someone else saw value in this skill set and asked me to stay on as a consultant, the seed was planted of like, well, could I do this? Like, could I charge people money? Could I help them? Like, could I use this skill set for good? And that is when the seed was planted to actually start my own business. So I got incorporated by the time my son was 2 months old. But when I had conversations with my husband, it was that I was going to stay home and raise our son until he could go to preschool, which would be 2 years old. And because I'm very goal-oriented and very committed once I make a commitment, that was it. So now I had this idea, this seed. I incorporated, I sat on it, and I used the time while I was at home with my son and consulting to really just like explore what is it going to be a business owner? What does it take to open up a business? And I launched my business on my son's second birthday. So that would be May 15th, 2012. So we celebrated my son's second birthday, and that was the official birth of my business. I am so glad I did it. And while I'm going to tell you a lot of things I wish I was told before I started my business, I'm going to tell you that ignorance is probably bliss and that maybe not knowing everything actually helped me learn and grow on my own and also not deter me from being a business owner. Like if someone would have said, hey, Amber, guess what? Over the next 10 years, you are going to have to grow a ton, like personally and professionally. You're going to have to change the way you see the world and what you can see is possible. And you are going to be challenged emotionally and physically. And it's going to feel really lonely and it's going to feel really freaking hard. And when you get on the other side of it, you are going to be so proud of the woman that you are, the business you created, the impact you made into the world. And I don't know that if someone said, you have to go through the fire to get to the other side, I would have said, sign me up. Sign me up. You know, I had a client reach out to me, a private client today reach out to me, and she's going through some incredibly challenging times in her business. And, you know, to be honest, she's questioning, is this the right path? Like, or is this the universe telling me that maybe I should close up business? And while we've all had those thoughts, you know, on our worst days and our worst seasons, we've thought, maybe I'm just not meant for this, or maybe this isn't my path. My advice to her was, first of all, only you could ever answer that for yourself. But I further said, my belief is that when things are hard, it doesn't necessarily mean you're on the wrong path. And when things are easy, it doesn't necessarily mean you're on the right path. And I truly believe that. And, you know, circling back to what I'm sharing here is that it hasn't been easy, smooth sailing for the last 9 years of my business. But I wouldn't change it because every time it's been that more challenging, I have had to rise to the occasion. I've had to learn, grow, ask for help, push through limiting beliefs. And I would not be who I am had I not had those challenges. And the who I am is such an unexpected gift of being a business owner that no one told me. No one said, guess what? This is going to be the biggest personal development growth you'll ever go through as being a business owner. I thought it was about, you know, being the best at my skill set, being the best at how I can help my clients was what it was all about. And while that is incredibly important, no doubt that's important, it's really about the better that I get, the more growth I personally have, the more value I have for my clients, and the more value I have for my team members. And so personal growth has been an incredibly huge part of this journey. So, all right, so I sidetrack. So let's go back. So I started the company. And when I first started the company, I had no dreams or hopes of being anywhere really out of Las Vegas. My initial thought was, okay, I know that business owners are challenged with organization and time. And I know that they have resources around them, meaning great coaching and strategies, and they go to trainings. But from my experience, because part of my corporate job, it wasn't my last position in the company, but during the time that I was there for a few years, I was actually a business coach for the top sales executives in the company in real estate. And when I was a coach, I coached them on the systems and processes the company had created, but I coached the agents on how to implement those strategies in their business to leverage through team building. I loved that job. I mean, that was my most favorite job and experience I had had for the entire time I ever worked for this company. And I remember having that thought many, many years before that I found it so interesting that these were very successful business owners. And yet they would come to each of the sessions saying, I am plateauing. I am so overwhelmed. I want to grow. I want to implement these strategies, but I'm so busy working in my business. I have no time to work on my business. And so we'd have a great strategy session. They were totally positive and optimistic. And then they would come to the next session and say, I didn't implement any of it. Now, at that time, I was not coaching or training on implementation, but I found it really interesting that there were some that implemented and many, many, many that didn't, which is the seed that I later revisited to say, what is the difference of those that can take action, those that can work on their business and not just in their business? So when I first started my business, I actually had business cards made up called Organization Expert. And I was going to go into these small businesses and help them with organization, because if they could be more organized, they'd have more time, their businesses would run better. And I just saw so much disorganization all around me in my experiences that I was like, surely this is needed. Now, in hindsight, it is absolutely needed. My business started growing, but really, really slow. And I really didn't know about like true marketing at the time. But I learned a lesson. Somewhere along the early days of being in business, I switched my title to efficiency consultant, focusing on the outcome of organization. And by just changing my title to efficiency consultant, my business started blowing up. Because my belief is that organization was seen as a luxury, something they didn't really have time for. Oh, that would be nice if I had the time to create organization in the business. But when I changed to efficiency consultant, it was like, oh my gosh, like that's a necessity to succeed. And so early on in my business, it grew from referral, word of mouth. And then from word of mouth and clients sharing with other clients, I started doing some other things like speaking. Like offices in real estate have sales meetings. I would do presentations there. I would do presentations at associations, at networking events. And so I really was just out in the community local in Las Vegas trying to meet business owners. And for where my business was at, it was working. Like I was getting clients. And I had this like nudging feeling that efficiency consultant wasn't quite it. And when I say nudging feeling, I'm not talking about in the early years. So this isn't within months. This isn't within a few years. And this nudging feeling was like, I think I need to position myself differently. And it was a natural evolution to position and market myself different because what was happening was my services had naturally changed. And my services changed from physically organizing people's offices and creating business systems and checklists and processes and SOPs and like the actual efficiency in their business, like processes, to realizing that even with the best systems in place, if the business owner isn't changing how they show up and they don't personally possess the skill set of managing themselves, their team, and their time, it didn't matter what system I put into place. Once I left, it was a matter of time before the system would break. And that was really, really defeating for me because I would be all in on this. And I was invested in the outcome of the business and, making sure that the work that I did or that they paid me to do really gave them that long-term return or success. And I wasn't seeing it. So I naturally shifted in incorporating conversations about how do you implement these systems? How do you stay consistent with these systems? How do you change as the business owner? Because if you're not leading with the expectation and standards that we run by these systems, then when an employee leaves or an employee decides it's not important to them to work off of a checklist or a process, it doesn't happen. And then lastly, it was that it wasn't all about the employees. I realized that even if they were hiring me to help their employees run effectively and efficiently, I could see behind the scenes that they personally, as the business owner, were not working productively or efficiently. So there's where the productivity specialist was born. And I shifted with an official title change and website change and really leaned into niching in with working with just the business owners. So at this point, I decided I'm not working with employees. And I also shifted into the coaching role versus the doing role. And this was huge too, because all my business money revenue was created up to this point as a consultant or coming in and implementing systems and processes physically with my time. And when I decided that I was going to position myself as a coach, this is like a longer process. I wish I could give you time frames, but it was an evolution of a process of really asking myself, how can I get the best results for my clients? And really having that be my North Star is if this is the problem we're solving, what do I see as the fundamental root of the problem? And how can I help them get to the solution? So over these years, and also the years that I had thought about the business but didn't quite start the business, I devoured business books and productivity books, time management. I devoured it so that I could internalize it and figure out what makes sense. Like, where are the gaps in working with my clients? Like, what are their gaps and how can I help them? And I am so thankful I did that. But you don't know what you don't know. That's my point. And so if I could wrap this section of the podcast up, is that it is completely normal to have a natural evolution. And the tip or strategy is that I had to keep asking myself what was best for my clients to get the best results, and listening to that voice and not being attached and stuck to my initial, title, or being attached or stuck to what I had initially envisioned my business being, but really saying, okay, this is what matters, is long-term sustainable results for my clients. And as I get more experience and I know more, what does that mean? And can I take the risk of shifting my entire business model to match that? And I'm so thankful that I did. And what you're hearing is iteration after iteration of what actually turned into what my business is today. All right, so then now you heard the story of how I went from organization expert to efficiency consultant to the productivity specialist, but it was still met with an overall marketing challenge. And the marketing challenge that I have found is that no one wakes up and says, I need a productivity coach. Like, seriously, like, you may wake up and say, I wish my business didn't run me. I wish I didn't feel overwhelmed. I wish I knew how to manage my time. You may say things like that, but for the buyer, you, the person that has the problem, to wake up and identify and connect the dots of, I have this problem and I need a productivity specialist or productivity coach, doesn't actually happen. So if you're sick, you go to, if your throat hurts, that you go to an ENT, ear, nose, and throat doctor, right? Like, if you're having throat issues. If you break your arm, you need a doctor. If you need to buy or sell a house, that you contact a realtor. And there are so many times where I'm like, man, I wish I could just say I was a realtor, because that's it. Like, when I say I'm a realtor, what I do and how I can help you. And yes, you can definitely elaborate on that. But people actually wake up and say, I need a realtor. So by knowing that, I had decided that it was my role and my job for my business to succeed, to educate business owners in what a productivity specialist or productivity coach is and how they can help them. And when I could get in front of people and share with them what I help my clients with, then I would get an audience that was nodding their head. I would get people that were like, yes, oh my gosh, I had no idea this existed. I need your services. So the first iteration of that was that I started speaking. Like I said, I spoke at every single business luncheon, no matter what industry, in Las Vegas. I made the rounds all over town. I spoke probably 4 to 6 times a month. I really loved speaking. I loved getting in front of audiences and doing presentations and trainings, because for me, it gave me a platform to be able to share how I could help them, but in a way that I was helping them, right? Like, so when I'm speaking and training, I'm helping them in the moment and then saying, hey, if you liked this and this is your challenge, reach out to me about working together to continue this. And that also worked. And then I thought, well, what if I spoke like nationally? What if my business was outside of Las Vegas? Because honestly, while this is a marketing strategy, this is running its course, because now I'm going back to repetitive luncheons and associations and business meetings. And so I'm going to saturate the market with this type of marketing, right? And so the seed was like, what if I took my business outside of Las Vegas and went national? And again, earlier in my business, like I didn't even know what that meant. I just knew that I needed a bigger pond to play in so that I could get more clients. So I started blogging, and blogging was a way for me to get on the internet and have people find me that was not in Las Vegas. And I chose blogging not because I loved writing and not because I thought blogging was the end all be all. I chose blogging because of my limited experience and that I only saw businesses that were national, that were kind of in my industry or in complementary industries, blogging at this time. Like blogging was huge. And so I started blogging. I didn't ask myself, hey, do you like blogging? Do you enjoy writing? What does this look like? How do you actually go from a blog to turning them into clients? I didn't ask any of those questions. I just decided one day I was going to start blogging. And at that time, Crystal, who's still with me, is with me in my business. And I remember being like, guess what? We're bloggers. We're blogging. And I did not write the blogs. I would speak the blogs. I would just talk about a topic that was inspired by a client or inspired by an experience on how I helped a client on a topic. And I would talk it out with her, and then she would write the blog for me. And that was because I had a real issue with sitting down, looking at a blank piece of like a blank screen and start typing away. And blogging, there was a lot to learn and understand. And we did it. Like we did this whole thing for, I would say at least a couple years. And it never, maybe 18 months, it never really got traction. And I'm like, but I'm doing all the right things. So I thought at the time. And I am, got the links and I've got the SEO going and I got the images going and I got the social media. And it was like this checklist of like, I know we're doing all the things, but why aren't we getting traction? And worst, I didn't even ask myself if I enjoyed this. So at the time, I listened to podcasts, but never even saw in my own mind how podcasting could help my business. Well, then one day I asked myself, why don't I podcast? I'm literally walking and pacing behind Crystal to write these emails. I'm talking it out. I love speaking. I love going to these luncheons and having a platform to teach. Why don't I put a mic in front of me and see what happens? And that was the best decision I had ever made in my business. And not because podcasting was a better business strategy than blogging, but because podcasting was in alignment with my skill sets and the things I enjoyed. And there you have it. There are going to be people out there that absolutely love writing and blogging and storytelling through the written word, and they are probably blowing it up, and they're blowing up their businesses. But that was the missing piece that I was not implementing in my business, was asking myself, what do I enjoy doing? And that is the lesson I have taken all these years later of that. I don't care what strategy a business coach tells me to do. I don't care what strategy my friend or my colleague or what I see on Instagram is doing. None of that matters to me other than that it's letting me know that it's possible to succeed doing it. After I can see that it's possible to succeed, the next question is do I enjoy it? Would I enjoy it? How can we also incorporate that strategy into the business and Amber enjoys it? Because when you enjoy it or Amber enjoys it, it makes it a hell of a lot easier to show up consistently. Because come on, I'm here talking to you about marketing and podcasting and blogging and all the things, but I'm a productivity coach. You're a realtor. You're an interior designer. You own a workroom. You're an attorney. You are doing the thing that you are skilled at. Your business is your special skill. And yet we find ourselves as these service-based business owners wearing the hat of marketing because I don't care how skilled you are at what it is you can do and how you can help your clients and make an impact in the world. If nobody knows what it is that you do and how you can help them, it doesn't even matter. And that is what I wish someone would have shared with me is that, hey, Amber, I know you're going to fine tune your craft. I know you're going to get better at your skill set. But ultimately, when you decided to start a business, you also decided to be incredibly good at marketing or getting good enough at understanding that marketing is a huge part of the business. And if it's not you, you need to pay somebody on your team that has excellent marketing skills to let the world know what it is you do and how you can do it. So I decided I was going to start podcasting. And I remember investigating it. And that's just my personality, is that I wanted to know all the things. And I'm listening to podcasts and I'm seeing how they do intros and how they interview and who they have and what's the show format and are they solo episodes? Are they interview episodes? I became a student and I became incredibly curious at what makes up a great podcast and how can I implement some of those strategies into my podcast. I also looked at what was the, time commitment and money resources needed to start producing a podcast on a regular basis. And after doing all my research, I had decided to attend Podcast Movement, which was a podcasting conference. And I did that just a couple months before I actually launched my podcast. And when I tell you that things do not, just because things seem hard, it doesn't mean you're on the wrong track. Because I was meant to start my podcast January 1st, 2017. And January 1st, 2017, I got really, really sick. I got back-to-back sinus infections. I ended up having sinus surgery. The sinus surgery went bad. I got a staph infection. It was wicked the whole first quarter of 2017. And I thought, how could this be? I've been preparing to start this podcast and having this due date for so many months. Like, I've already put money into it. I bought the mics. I've prepared. I went to this conference. Like, I've done all the things. How is this possible that I'm missing my own deadline? And so if I had said, oh, that means I'm not meant to do this, that would have been the single worst decision of my entire business, was to say, because it was hard or not working out how I had planned, it must not be meant to be. So I ended up launching at the end of Q1, like March, April timeframe. And that journey was like, okay, so I got a plan. I'm going to do one interview, one solo episode. And when I first started interviewing, I had no idea that interviewing was a skill set. And trust me, I've said this so many times, and so many of you lovely, lovely people have told me I can't tell the difference. But if you go back to the early episodes of me interviewing people, what you may or may not know is that interviewing is a skill set. And because my personality is incredibly prepared, and when I don't feel confident with something, the more I prepare, the better I feel like I can show up. So I had interviewed my sphere of influence, like the people that I looked up to in business and the people that I thought could bring incredible value to the audience that I didn't quite have yet, but to the audience that eventually listened to it. And while they were amazing, they were great, I remember having my list of questions, and I did not care what they answered. I was going to the next question. And I had a set amount of questions, and no matter what direction the interview went in, I was certain to ask these questions. And I look back and I'm like, that was horrible. Like, that was really, really bad. And I guess I say bad because now I have such a different experience when I interview someone. When I interview someone, I tell them this before the interview. I say, my interviews are incredibly conversational. Here is what I think we're going to talk about based on your expertise and what I believe my audience needs to hear. And after this, I am literally going to put myself as if I'm driving in the car listening to the podcast, and I'm going to ask you questions as if I was listening, and I'm like, I want to know this, and then I want to know that, and I want to know this. And as soon as I put myself in the interview, completely present, hearing every word they had to say, and coming from a place of curiosity of saying, and then what? And then what would you do? Or how would that happen? And the next logical follow-up question, interviewing became incredibly joyful. I enjoyed it tremendously. And it really created just a much better experience for the listener. And so that's something that has actually gotten so much better over the last 4 years is my skill set at being present and interviewing. The other thing that I have also learned with podcasting is that guests can be a wild card. So when I first started podcasting, I only interviewed people that I knew and I already had a relationship with. And somewhere along the line, I went through all the people that I knew and had a relationship with. And I had to bring on guests that I didn't know. And I can be pretty animated and I can be a fast talker and I'm excited. And so I realized that it was really important to have guests on that can match my energy level. And I don't mean match like they need to be the same as me at all. What I mean is that if I have somebody on that talks like this and is dry and not really passionate about what they're talking about, it really doesn't allow me to show up my best, well, number one. And two, that's not what the listeners of Productivity Straight Talk, I believe, are coming back to listen to. So when you decide that you're going to listen to a podcast from episode to episode to episode, it's generally because you have a connection with the host and the topic. And so if you're coming back because you like the way that I speak or my energy or just how I show up, and then I have someone on that's completely opposite of that, my guess is you're not going to enjoy that episode as much. Because there are plenty of podcasts out there and those are perfectly good and they attract listeners that's how they want to listen to the content. So for me, it was an experience thinking of it through the lens of the listener and what they would come to expect. And then also making sure that the chemistry was there in the conversation that I could show up my best. And then the next thing about a guest that I take incredibly, I take this so seriously, you guys, is saying yes to a guest to me is such a responsibility because I'm giving them the platform to be in your ear for 45 minutes. That I need to vet them and hear them and know that they're an expert on their topic, because I am entrusting them and the audience that trusts me. And whether I am explicitly saying that I agree with a guest or with their product or program or whatever, to me, when I'm a listener of a podcast, I assume that it's implied that I am endorsing that the host is endorsing the guest. And so because that's my experience listening to a podcast, I believe I need to do the same thing. So I'm pretty ruthless with having guests on. I almost say no to all pitches. If I say yes, it's because I've done a pre-interview with them. I've done my homework on them. I've listened to other interviews they've done. And I truly believe they can bring a different conversation to Productivity Straight Talk that has not already been here. And so when that started happening, it didn't actually make sense to have a guest every other episode. Every other episode would mean that I need to find 26 new people out in the world and vet them. And I also, marketing-wise, realize I'm giving up half of the time with my listeners to someone else for them to kind of jump on my platform that I've spent years and years to build. So I ended up veering away from saying, okay, every other episode needed to be an interview, and giving me the opportunity to do more solo episodes, which I really do enjoy. What else about guests? Oh, that there are guests that I have interviewed that you have never heard the episodes of. And those were hard decisions, meaning I just have a heart and I don't want to make anyone feel bad. And, it can be an awkward conversation. But at the end of the day, if I thought, yes, they're going to be a great guest, and whether I was off or they were off or they said multiple things that I just didn't agree with, then I never published their interview. Because at the end of the day, I feel like I'm the gatekeeper of what I put out in the world with attachment to the brand of Productivity Straight Talk. All right. So then we talked about, so now we're talking about guests and solos. Let's talk about the idea of why I podcast. So for me, podcasting is giving me a lot of incredible gifts, some that were completely unexpected. One of the gifts that I wasn't aware of when I said, hey, I want to be a podcaster, is that it allowed me to fine-tune my voice, to improve my speaking skill set, to be hyper aware of how to take complicated things that may feel a little complex, right? A complicated, complex, and really figure out, how do I simplify this into a message that can have an impact on somebody in 30 minutes? And always asking myself, okay, what do I think would be of the most value to share with the listeners? And when you ask yourself that for 4 years, you get really, really customer focused, meaning everything that you're doing, everything you're putting out in the world now gets filtered through, how can I take something that feels complicated and simplify it? How can I make sure that when I am in front of somebody, whether it's an audience, a live audience, and I'm speaking, or on the podcast, how do I make sure that the time investment that they're giving me is incredibly valuable for them? And that has trickled through lots of decisions in the business that I think have been really helpful. The other thing that I, feel that has been a benefit is to say, I've done something 200 times. I've done something consistently for 4 years. How cool is that? And I did it even when I wasn't getting results at the beginning. Like, I wasn't like turning on the mic and suddenly all these clients were coming. That is not how it worked. And I realized, I asked myself this several times. I was like, if I don't podcast because I'm not getting the results I want, then what? Like, what do I think could possibly give me better results that I, remember, would enjoy? And I couldn't come up with anything. I couldn't come up with anything that would be that centerpiece of my marketing, that would allow me to create content on a regular basis, that would allow me to have my voice, speak my voice, that I thought could get me better results. So I was like, nope, we're sticking with it. And I was stuck through it. And it wasn't that I was doing podcasting wrong. I wasn't using podcasting as the marketing tool to its best ability. So while I always choose my topics based on value, I also now choose topics to really have the listener, this is really truthful, look and see, oh, what transformation could I experience if I worked with Amber? How can Amber specifically help me and my business? And having those types of conversations, not every time, but more regularly, let people not just consume a free podcast and be like, yep, I got what I needed. That's good enough for me. But really inviting them to see what was possible past the free podcast. And that was huge. That was really a big thing, because I was hearing, and I was so frustrated in the first, 18 months, probably even 2 years, so frustrated hearing, your podcast is so amazing. Thank you so much. It's all I need. Like, I got it. Like, that's it. Like, this is all I need. And I'm like, no, you guys, you don't understand. This is just the tip. Like, this is just the beginning of the transformation. Let me tell you what's possible, but I wasn't doing that, right? I would give you a beginning to end like solution, and there was nothing, like, you guys didn't see what was after that. And I did, because I saw the bigger picture. Like, I knew what was possible from when I worked with my clients. And so it was my job to convey that in the episodes. Also, early on in the episodes, you will know that I did not do a call to action of how you can work with me or how you can get on my email list on a regular basis. My head was like, surely if they enjoy the podcast, they'll just Google search me and figure out how to work with me or figure out how to get on my email list. Like, I don't know why I thought it was up to you to connect the dots. And so that was a really duh moment. And I thought, okay, no, I've built this audience. I put so much time and effort into each episode. The best thing I can do is actually invite them to take the next step. And so now you'll know that every single episode, I have some way in which you can take a next step with me or my company. And I see that as less about marketing and more about, hey, I have an invitation for you. And when you're ready, I'm ready. And when you're ready, I'm ready and I'm here for you. And by doing that consistently over time has now reaped exponential results in the business. Because I have clients now that are like, I've listened to your podcast for years and now I'm ready. I listen to your podcast and I see how you can help me. And so I thought, oh my gosh, I actually had the wrong perspective. My perspective was that if someone listened and they became a listener, that within months they would become a client. And that is not true. This shattered my belief. And the belief was, while that does happen, I mean, I have people that listen to one episode and reach out to work with me. But what is more common is that people are building a relationship and they're seeing what's possible and then they reach out. So now bringing that full circle to me doing something that I truly, truly enjoy, podcasting, and staying incredibly consistent, allowed me to see that this was a long-term marketing play. And by seeing that, it made me question, oh my gosh, what else have I started and stopped in the business that I thought surely I should get immediate results or I should be seeing results by now? But I wasn't savvy enough to know this is a long-term play, Amber. The key is show up, be consistent, give value. Show up, be consistent, give value, and have faith that in the long term, you will see it show up in your business. A few other things that I've tried over the years are pre-recorded commercials that we would insert into the episodes. And I did that because I saw other people doing it. And I thought, surely that's working. And, that's how commercials work in TV shows and things like that. Well, after doing it for some time, I also did the gut check of does that feel good? Do I think that that is speaking to my ideal client? And ultimately, it didn't, and it doesn't speak to you. It seems so abrupt and commercialized, for lack of a better word. And I thought, no, my listeners and my clients come to me because we're having this conversation, albeit a one-sided conversation. I truly communicate in the episodes thinking this would be just like if it was a two-way conversation. And if I had something I wanted to share with you or invite you or tell you about, I would just organically talk about it as it seemed to make sense in our conversation. And so that's where I've moved to with each episode as well for call to actions, is that when it makes sense, I will talk about the thing that naturally makes sense for the next step and not do these these pre-recorded commercials. But speaking of paid, since I misspoke, is that I've also had the opportunity to do, paid advertising or have people do sponsorships for the podcast. And while this may not be my answer forever, it has been my answer that I actually decline it. For me, again, my approach to the podcast is this feels like a relationship and it feels personal and it feels like I don't want to commercialize it with paid ads. I'm not doing this to get $1 or $2, and I'm not doing this to actually, make a profit from, in the sense of my podcast through advertising or sponsorships needs to make a profit. I'm doing this as an avenue to let the world know what it is I do and how I can help them, to serve in a way to let them know that when they're ready, I'm ready to work with them. And if that's my goal, having them hear commercials for all these other products and programs just doesn't feel right. So that is a path and a choice that I have taken, but also had to learn from. With that being said, it is my tool for growing the business, right? And so if I think about how many clients I've gotten from listeners over the years in Productivity Straight Talk, it is more than paid for itself, the time for me and my team. But again, those results didn't happen right away. Another lesson that I have surprisingly learned too, and have been much more aware of over the last couple years, is the drastic difference between someone that books a discovery call with me that has never listened to a podcast episode. Like, say they were referred by someone else, or they heard me speak on someone else's podcast, so they only heard that one interview, but they hadn't listened to repetitive episodes of Productivity Straight Talk. The calls with those potential clients are completely different. And it's not that one's good or bad, but the potential client that has listened to Productivity Straight Talk has a sense for who I am, what I stand for, what I believe. They know my voice and I'd hope my heart. And by the time we get on a call, they're not interviewing me per se. That's not how I feel. Whereas someone that was new to me would be interviewing me. It's more of a natural continuation of the conversation we're having on the podcast to now we're actually having this two-way conversation, and we get to talk about their business, and we get to talk about how I believe I could support them in their business. And I'll be honest, it's super, super enjoyable. And for me, that's a gift. Every time I get off a call like that, I thank my previous self for making the choice to podcast because that feels like a great gift. Let's see, what is something else that I've changed over the years? When I first started the podcast, let's go back to guests. When I first started the podcast, I actually had other time management and productivity experts on the podcast. And again, I did this because that's what I saw other platforms doing. And I thought, for sure, we need to be talking about time management and productivity, and it doesn't need to just be me. Well, over the years, as the audience had grown and my own voice had evolved, I realized, why would I do that? Because oftentimes I disagree with the advice, or I disagree with the strategies. And so, not that I disagree with them all, I'm not saying that, but that this is my place to have my own thoughts around time management and productivity shared. So I actually made the very purposeful decision that I no longer invite guests on where their expertise in their business is time management and productivity. I rather love talking time management and productivity with other business owners that are giving real examples of how they're implementing strategies that work for them in their businesses and their industries. And then also expanding upon that and bringing topics that are complementary to time management and productivity from a business sense. When we think about what our highest value, best activities are, oftentimes it's things that we might need to improve our skill set in, like marketing or sales, or, gosh, I've had so many. Our health, right? Like, I'm not the end all be all health expert by any means, but I see how our health is 100% connected to how we show up in our businesses and productivity. So I would bring on other experts that is their zone of genius that can complement the overarching conversation we have here at Productivity Straight Talk about how can we grow our businesses, increase profits, decrease stress. And so that also has evolved over the years of the types of guests that I invite on here. When I named the podcast, I sure wish I could remember the moment I named the podcast, because I remember the moment I named my son before he was born. Like, I remember where we were at. I remember what we were doing. I remember we were in my husband's truck. I knew where we were going. And I don't remember the actual moment I named Productivity Straight Talk. And I wish I did, because I freaking love the name. And I love the name for not maybe the reason you think. I love the name because when I chose Productivity Straight Talk, it was that moment that I decided to lean into who I am. Being a direct person, being a straight talker, having opinions has not always been something that I was incredibly comfortable with in all areas of my life. And I'm not for everyone. And I realized that my approach and who I am makes me exactly who I am and perfect and right for the right person that actually enjoys that direct, straight talk, no nonsense, no BS. And so when I decided to lean into it and actually wrap my brand around my own personality of straight talk, I think it was the best decision because I was able to embrace who I was and who I am 100% in what felt like a very bold and vulnerable way. And speaking of vulnerability, this has been a journey of allowing me to show up and become more and more vulnerable with you with each and every recording of these episodes. I started pulling back and sharing personal stories and personal experiences and personal challenges. And for me, along with that moment when I named the podcast Productivity Straight Talk, and then over the years of there not being this is what I'm willing to share, this is what I'm not willing to share, because what if they judge me, or what if they don't see it as perfect, or what if they have a different opinion about something that I'm doing in my life? And for me, those episodes when I just started dabbling with being more vulnerable were the very episodes that I got the most feedback from, and people seem to enjoy and like the very most. And so once I started getting that feedback, I was like, wow, this can be easier. Like I can literally turn the mic on and ask myself, what experiences or what am I thinking about this topic in all areas of my life that I can bring to an episode? And when I started doing that, I felt really like free and liberated and actually a closer connection with my audience because I was willing to go there to be more vulnerable than just, producing a podcast that straight taught. Like if you go back to the earlier episodes, it was all about just teaching. It was good. It was great content, but there was no personal stories, I guess is what I would say. And, fast forward, it's the personal stories that let you know, like, I'm a person too. Like, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm a business owner. I am having similar challenges, maybe not similar in time management or productivity, but just similar in life and how things in my life influence my thoughts and ideas around time and productivity and growing our businesses. So I'm so grateful and thankful that this has been a platform that has allowed me to step into that voice. Another decision that I had made early on when I decided to podcast too was the actual intro music. And I wanted to share that here with you because I actually get comments about the hard rock music intro. I've actually had people DM me saying, like, that doesn't sound like you. There seems to be such a disconnect. Like, why? Pretty much like, why is that your music? And I just need to tell you, it's because while I can come with a softer side and heart and compassion and all those things, like I am a girl that loves hard rock music, right? And it's something that's unexpected when you meet me or you might see an image of me. And so my favorite music before I would speak or do like a training or a webinar to get my energy going was AC/DC for those about to rock. And that inspired my selection because I can't have AC/DC because it's protected, but that inspired my selection with the music on the podcast of like, let's get ready, let's go, let's get our energy, like let's get that movement before we dive into something like talking about time management, productivity, growing our businesses. So the rock music is just a, tipping of the hat to if you were in my car driving with me down the road, you're listening to probably some hard rock or definitely AC/DC, Red Hot Chili Peppers. There you go. So there's the behind the scenes on why you get to listen to that each and every week. As we close out, I want to share with you that I am always learning and I am always evolving, and marketing, for me, my primary method to marketing has been the podcast. And once I started finding and leaning into my voice and showing up consistently, it became the center of a flywheel because all the content in my business actually starts with the podcast. So from the podcast, our social media posts, right? It's our weekly emails to our email list. We tell a different story. We give different, behind the scenes in our emails that you don't get on the podcast, but it all links to our weekly podcast. Blog articles on my website are sourced and started from the podcast. I write for multiple magazines, and the content is inspired by podcast episodes that we have found really landed with the audience or has really good downloads. And so we take the core of that episode and we share some other examples and different stories in those articles, but I'm not starting with content from scratch. And so I also speak on, I'm a guest on other people's podcasts. Well, the topics that I talk about, over the years, I would pitch to be a guest early on. I'd be like, I can talk about these 5 things, pick a topic. I'm more than happy to talk about it. And now I get booked and I'm like, ask me anything. I'll go in any direction. I've got stories. I got examples. I got frameworks. I've got whatever, like kind of challenge, like stump me, please. But that doesn't really happen. So the reason that doesn't happen is because I've done so much content creation around my topic of choice, which is time management and productivity and growing your business, that I have already done the work of having an opinion, a framework, a story, an example that I can share whenever anyone asks anything. And that's powerful because now I'm leveraging my time. There was a time where I'd really prepare for being interviewed to make sure that I didn't get stumped. And now with all this experience of showing up consistently, creating content, I don't need to prepare. The same thing is true for speaking. So I still do, some free speaking, all virtual right now, not just because of the pandemic or COVID, but because I'm not going to travel for free. I get paid to speak as well, and I'll travel for that, but I'm not going to travel to speak for free at this point in my business. So again, I can take concepts and pieces that I've shared on an episode or multiple episodes and turn that into a really great training or presentation to associations all over the country. And I do that quite frequently. I would not have that source of content around my expertise if I didn't stay committed to podcasting. So always learning, always evolving, always figuring out how to take the time and effort that I put into the podcast and get the most out of it in multiple ways. I want to close out by saying thank you. Thank you for listening to this long episode of us just having a conversation about the things that I've learned over the years and the evolution of Productivity Straight Talk. I'm so excited about what's to come on Productivity Straight Talk. I get excited about, experimenting with different formats of episodes and having different guests. Speaking of guests, before we close out, that is a gift that I did not share. I don't know how I missed this. I meant to share this with you. The guests and relationships that I make, I have made some amazing connections, and I wouldn't have done that had I not been a host that invited people on to share their expertise. And that is really key because I think that relationships can really open up a lot of doors. 2, the relationship with other podcasters. So as of the time of this recording, I have an airline ticket. I'm hoping nothing goes wrong, meaning COVID tests are negative, flights are not canceled, nothing major happens, but I'm going to Puerto Rico with 2 of my podcasting friends. And when I say podcasting friends, they're dear friends to me and my family now, but I met them at a podcasting conference. And now I've been able to build over the last several years really, really great relationships where our families actually vacation together. And that would not have happened if I hadn't chose to get into podcasting. There are dots and ripples that actually kind of can go on forever for me to say, I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for the relationships, for the guests. I'm grateful for the relationships of fellow podcasters in the community and their coach and helping them with their challenges and growing their business. I am so thankful for you for tuning in each and every week. I'm thankful for the DM messages that I get of encouragement or just sheer appreciation, because if you're not a podcaster, which you may not know, is I'm seriously sitting in my office all by myself, other than my puppy dogs at my feet, and just talking into a mic. And to do that and to have the energy that I have to envision you. Like, I have to think about the email that I received that said, oh my gosh, you shared X, Y, and Z, and this completely changed X, Y, and Z, or this really, was able to help solve this problem for me in my business. Those are the things that I'm like, this is why I do what I do. This is who I'm speaking to. So thank you so much. Thank you for leaving me reviews. We have so many reviews on the podcast, that especially on Apple, iTunes podcast, and every review that's given is really like a token of appreciation that I don't take lightly, because now when others are kind of perusing, where are they going to invest their time and who are they going to listen to? I think reviews really matter. So thank you so much for keeping the reviews coming in as well. You truly have gifted to me a relationship that you don't even know, right? So I get it. Like, podcasting is a very intimate relationship. And what I mean by this is that I'm coming along with you in your ears while you are picking up your kids or working out or sitting at your computer or working in your garden. Like, I'm with you as you're living your life. And I thank you so much for entrusting me in that relationship, because what we choose to put between our ears, seriously, the information and the people that we choose to accept information from, is a very important choice. And so when I see the number of downloads I have and the number of business owners who are entrusting me with that, I have such a huge sense of gratitude. So thank you so much for joining me in a look back of the evolution of productivity straight talk, celebrating with me episode 200, and really just giving me an opportunity or an episode to tell you how thankful I am for you listening each and every week to Productivity Straight Talk. I have loved having you listen to this episode and all the episodes of Productivity Straight Talk. I sure hope you found today's episode to be valuable and insightful, and that you were able to take away some strategies and lessons that can be incredibly helpful for you and your business as you market, meaning telling the world what it is you do and how you can help them. So that's my straight talk for you today. Until next time, have a productive week.